I got that structure from the Marine Corps, but when I got outside in the private sector, and even as a civil servant for a short period of time, you have to build that structure for yourself a lot of times. So system exists whether you like it or not. As a civilian, if you don't build systems, nothing happens. And that's the biggest shock. So freedom without structure ends up being chaos.
Welcome to Exit Buddy, Veteran Stories to Guide You. This podcast shines a light on real struggles and triumphs of veterans navigating life after the military.
In each episode, we dive into heartfelt stories of resilience, setbacks, a little humor, and growth as veterans transition and find new purpose in civilian life. And here for the journey, we're your host. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kathleen. If you're looking for inspiration, practical advice, or just a reminder that you're not alone in your transition, Exit Buddy is here to help you thrive beyond the uniform. Enjoy today's story from our next honorary Exit Buddy. Today, I'm really excited because we have a really interesting, wonderful Marine who will be joining us. But first off, how are you, Rachel?
Fantastic. So good I can hardly stand myself. A little frozen, but good.
You mean it's still cold down there in the South, even though we've thawed out up here?
We don't know how to act down here. It drops below 70 and we lose our minds.
I know how that is. So today we're excited to welcome Ferguson Juice Dale today, a Marine Corps veteran and aviator who's building technology to help communities respond more effectively to natural disasters. Juice, welcome to the studio.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And all the veterans out there, I want to say hello and appreciate you.
That is a fantastic way to start, and definitely echo that. Thank you for all of those veterans out there. So let's now talk about your service and how you became a veteran. And I know it started a couple years ago in the lovely Marines. So tell us your origin story, Juice. How did you join the Marines? What made you want to join? What got you there, my friend?
Well, I'll start by saying I didn't join the Marines because I had it all figured out. I joined because I didn't have it all figured out. So a few key things to hit. Granddaddy Ferguson was in the United States Marine Corps. Also, my brother, Brian King Jr., was in the United States Marine Corps active duty. And so I saw him and the changes that went in him, and that was very helpful before I go into the story. So I was vying for a football scholarship. So I finished high school early 2000, and I was going to try out for the team, and I was vying for a scholarship with one other person. Unfortunately for me, I still had some immaturity going on. And so I'll just say it, I was chasing girls. So there was a curfew for freshmen, and we weren't allowed to leave the school. And what I ended up doing is being told by a girl back where I lived before I went off to college that she had a little crush on me. So she invited me to a basketball game for our old alma mater, our high school, and I decided to drive in a 72 Ford LTD convertible, in case you ever want to get an image of that, at 13 hours from western Missouri or central Missouri to the Atlanta, Georgia area. So when I did that, the car started smoking. And so we can't use my car. I had to admit that. So she said, okay, well, I'll come pick you up. So she picks me up, and there's another guy in the car. He's in the front seat. So my dreams are kind of crushed on that. And I'm riding the vehicle. I had driven so long and it was dark. I start to fall asleep. Next thing you know, I open my eyes and I see white light coming at me. And it turns out, we got in a head-on collision. A drunk driver who also, had been doing drugs turned into, the wrong lane, made a left turn and never got over into his lane, hit us. Fast forwarding to getting out of there, getting discharged from a hospital. I drove all the way back. We had to be back by, I think, 5 a.m. We were going to do strength training, and the first event was going to be bench press. Well, unfortunately, I was on muscle relaxers. I couldn't bench press the bar. I get back to the university. The special teams coach is like, hey, what kind of drugs are you doing? Because you can't even lift the bar, that kind of thing. So he takes me to this room, tells me to sit there and wait for the head coach. I fall asleep. I'm awakened by water on my head. And and being told like, okay, what kind of drugs are you doing? I said, I wasn't doing any drugs, that kind of thing. And so then I just came out with it and said what I did. They told me that I couldn't be on the team because I didn't have integrity. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. I had heard it before, but I had never really explored what that meant. So I'm off that team. I was vying for a scholarship against another wide receiver. And they told me that they were going to tell me this week that I had gotten the scholarship. But since I did what I did, he got the scholarship and I was gone. So I had to go back to Georgia from Missouri, tell my parents what happened and that I was actually in Georgia previously at the hospital. And so that wasn't a fun conversation for a, 18-year-old coming up. And I started working my way back into shape. And I start running by this recruiting station. At the time, they were building a new armed services center. And so there was a pull-up bar that was right outside these trailers. So I would run. A Marine shows up one day. He's like, I bet you can't do 10 pull-ups. So I get on the bar, I do 10 pull-ups. I get off and I keep running. Next time, I bet you can't do 15 pull-ups. 15 off the bar, keep running. Hey, I bet you can't do 20 pull-ups. So 20 pull-ups, get off the bar, keep running. And he goes, you know why you can't be a Marine? I was like kind of fed up at this point, of just hearing from these guys. And, I'm trying to recover. I want to go to the University of Georgia, play football. I start backpedaling and I go, I don't care. And he says, because you never try to do one more. And so that stuck in my head. And then I went into the recruiting station maybe a week or so later. It wasn't an immediate thing, so I got in the Marine Corps, and then while I was in recruit training, wasn't supposed to happen this way. They usually don't let you do a package until the other package is complete. But I got a letter while I was in recruit training that I got accepted into the officer program. And thankfully, I was able to accept. And so that's how I ended up joining the Marine Corps. Sorry for the long story there, but football was gone, and so was the identity I had built around it. So, did the running, and then I decided that was what I was missing in my life, was to do one more. And that mindset has carried with me since that time. And I realized that it wasn't the game of football I was chasing. It was the camaraderie. And there is, in my opinion, no greater way to do that than in service to your country, and with exceptional human beings. Not all of them, but a lot of them exceptional human beings in the U.S. Armed Forces.
So we are both military spouses, so we totally get how serving with those with integrity makes your life so much more fulfilling. I want to talk to you a little bit about the mind shift from you were, really focused on your football scholarship, and that changed, and you were rebuilding yourself mentally and physically, and ended up finding another opportunity. You had this opportunity of being enlisted and then moving to being an officer. So you then have this shift from military to civilian where you had structure, but you not necessarily have structure when you go into the civilian world. So talk about how your mind and your body were shifting during this transition from military to civilian, so that we can share for our audience this sort of infrastructure or skeleton as to how they can maybe move forward in their transition.
So from military to civilian, Marines give you structure. Civilian life makes you build it. So before I go into that, I'll talk about enlisted to officer. When I became an officer, I had the privilege of finishing college, and for about 4.5, almost 5 years, I was enlisted and made it to the rank of Sergeant E5 in the Marine Corps. What I was judged on was really, my physical fitness and my leadership, my proficiency in my occupation and my conduct. And then when I became an officer, it was just different. I remember sitting on a stoop, scuzz brushing my boots, just a regular brush, and you're just dusting off your suede boots. And I remember someone being like, why aren't you studying or chair flying for your next flight? And then conversely, or another story, I was underneath an aircraft. really interested in what was going on with how maintenance works on the aircraft that we were flying. And I remember feeling this kick in the bottom of my boot. And I kind of bent and looked, and it was the maintenance officer. And he's like, "Hey, how are your sign-offs toward being an aviation mission commander going in the syllabus?" And that let me know, like, oh, even though I'm really interested in this and enlisted Marines like this, and I like it too, it's not my role. They don't need me to do this. They need me to employ the aircraft as a weapon system and give them feedback about how it's flying. So I got that structure from the Marine Corps, but when I got outside in the private sector, and even as a civil servant for a short period of time, you have to build that structure for yourself a lot of times. So system exists whether you like it or not. As a civilian, if you don't build systems, nothing happens. And that's the biggest shock. So freedom without structure ends up being chaos. And then I did a SkillBridge internship, and that was more of a savior because I got a chance to work for a private sector company, Scientific Research Corporation, that allowed me to support the Marine Corps. So if you think about, if you've ever had a fish as a pet, when it's time to clean the tank for like a goldfish, you take, for example, this is what I did as a kid. We took like a Ziploc bag of some sort. We took the old water and we took the goldfish, we put it inside that bag. And then we cleaned the tank out, put in new water. But before we would put that fish back in the new water, we would let them get acclimated to the new water by lowering the bag into the new fresh water. And then after, a certain period of time, you could release them completely into that water and they wouldn't have any kind of like physiological problems, more so than they would if you just put them in that fresh water. So I got that transition. I'm very grateful for it. And because of that, I was able to transition into some things when I got that entrepreneurial bug that allowed me to begin taking elements from what I learned in the armed services and applying them appropriately and, with structure in mind in the private sector.
So I was just going to talk about, ask you about starting Semper Sky and why you picked a specific focus and what that focus was. But it also sounded like you had a mentor while you were still in uniform, and just sort of how that was helpful to you during the process.
There's someone who I really looked up to, and I'm going to say his name because I think that he deserves the credit for the success that I've been able to enjoy so far as a business owner. His name's Cesar Nader, so Cesar Nader. Cesar was in the Marine Corps active duty, and I think he was about 10 years ahead of me. He had a very impressive career, started enlisted, became I believe, a warrant officer, and then finished as a limited duty officer captain. Cesar saw that I was getting out, saw some of himself in me, and just a fellow U.S. Marine. He mentored to me, and he helped me understand, start your business now. Go ahead and fill out the paperwork while you're still active duty, so that when you walk out the door, you have all the certifications and things you need to immediately be marketable, to immediately get contracts. And I just listened, and I did what he told me, but I was stubborn. I have like my own way of thinking and knowing and doing. I'm an entrepreneur like he is. He has a belief system that, sometimes is contrary to mine, but thankfully I was willing to listen enough and get that good mentorship from him. To this day, even though we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, I will not stop appreciating that mentorship that he gave me. And I was able to start Semper Sky to take what I learned about coordination under pressure and apply it to emergency management, disaster response. Hopefully that answered the question adequately.
It did, because I find it always fascinating that many veterans go into entrepreneurship or go into their new businesses, sometimes focusing exactly on what they did in the military or starting a consultancy. And I really like the fact that you had a mentor. You had actually someone who told you to create it while you were still in uniform. This is the first time I've heard this. But then also that you are very niche focused, which is wonderful. So I want to keep building on your lessons learned as a business owner, and sort of what are some of the 3 basic tenets that you would pass on to any veteran who's considering becoming a business owner? What are the 3 things that you think that they should really consider?
Well, I would say the hardest lesson was learning what only I could do and letting go of the rest. So I had to fire myself from a lot of things. So if I tried to do everything myself, I'd become a bottleneck. If I delegated too much, I lost coherence. So the job is figuring out where you add the most value. So my job as the owner is to find these fires and be the screen, and allow people to be able to do their job without much interference. So anything that's interfering with their ability to do their job, I absorb it, that sort of thing. But there was a time where I was trying to do everything. And so I did nothing well. So that was the first thing I'd suggest is learn how to fire yourself, right? The next thing I'd say is there is a network of veterans and they're very capable. Use them. And I'll tell you, in my opinion, the most useful veterans that I've found are reservists because they understand mission focus and ambiguity. They have to do a lot of things on their own that structure is usually built in that funnels them toward. But they have to read for themselves military orders, directives, etc., and figure out how to make it work. So using them as freelancers lets me scale up when work comes in and scale down responsibly. Some of them are like, hey, I'm going to go backpack across Europe, then I'll help you for a few months, and then I'm going to go do some reserve duty, and then I'm going to go back to, and they don't have a stable, a steady job. So that was a very interesting place to tap into was the reserve structure. And some people may miss that because maybe they never were in the reserves. And then AI usage, I'm going to keep this practical, but I use AI to remove administrative drag so humans can focus on judgment and decision making. I stole that directly from working in the Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory in their Science and Technology Division around 2019. And that was during the time that General David Berger, the former Commandant of the Marine Corps, put out his planning guidance, which was basically what is known as Force Design now. It used to be called Force Design 2030. And now it's just force design. And that was extremely helpful because he said that he wanted to eliminate some of the administrative processes that Marines have to do so that they could focus more on their warfighting roles and some of their functions that make them specialized in what they do. And so I took that same model and I applied it to Semper Sky. Thankfully, large language models have come out that have enabled me to absorb some of the administrative tasks. And that allows me to be able to do more and folks who come work for me. So those are the three things I would say. 1, recognize the fact that you have to fire yourself sometimes. 2, don't forget about your network of veterans, reservists. And 3, use the technology to your advantage.
So we're going to wrap this up. And I just wanted to know if there was one piece of transition advice that you had not shared that you would like to share with our audience.
Yes, please. I want to say, know your value. Don't undersell your value. There will be things that you don't know. It'll be fragmented. For example, there's a certain job that has certain skill sets, requirements. That's why we do the SkillBridge internship program. But don't sell yourself short. You have a heart of service normally. And some companies try to take advantage of that and pay you less than what you're worth or don't give you the benefits that you should have. You've already done that time. Now it's time for you to know your value, understand it. And if they don't see it, I see it. And I want to let you know I appreciate you. You have that value.
Juice, thank you so much for your time today. It was really great meeting you. It was great following you on LinkedIn. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you.
It's an honor and a privilege. I encourage you all to keep climbing.
Thank you. It was great listening to Juice tell his story from dashed hopes of a college scholarship to joining the Marines to then building his own company, Semper Sky. It just shows you how veterans can translate their mission-focused mindset from the military world to the civilian world. I really loved his last piece of advice on knowing your value. We've heard this before, but it is something that needs to be said over and over again for veterans. Truly know your value when you put together your full package of your resume and your interview style when you go out into the world to find your next opportunity. Bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate all of the love and support that we have for our podcast. Follow for more episodes, but also be sure you subscribe to our Exit Buddy Veteran Voices LinkedIn newsletter. It's a great way to have a follow-up of this episode, but also connect with other people in the community and connect with our guests. Bye for now.